8-10 of spades. Sick flop. Yeah, I was hoping you have a
5,000. Well,
you fold. King, queen. So lucky we didn't qualify with the board. It was cheap.
great. 13,000.
Paulie G is probably wondering, what does Tony G mean by qualify? This classic
you want to
lines.
Turn the straight, up and down straight. You were in front of.
How much to play?
They played correct.
200.
Tom with the
Same.
3-bet. Small 3-bet.
3 players.
King 8. Two reasonable hands here. Jackson 9s. Tom is the 3-better. Receives the cold call.
Yeah, 14,000.
Gonna make it 14,000. Rui's in.
Just your typical 1K, 2K game. I'm about to go down the street and play one just after this recording, you know?
Yeah, sure.
Why not?
Buying for 200 blinds, no big deal. It's 400,000. It's whatever.
These guys are all short, actually, which is interesting. Wei Qin Yang decides to open anyway, despite the table being pretty short with 7-4 of hearts under the gun. Dwan with a pretty easy 3-bet with jacks, even though it's a very small 3-bet. I'm guessing this is based on stack sizes, right?
I guess so. It is surprisingly small to me too. Like my instincts are always to go bigger here. Maybe when you're playing stakes this high, you just don't have to go bigger. But I think you do. The money is all relative, right? It's weird to me.
One theory is that it's simply an isolation play. You just don't
Yes.
want to invite the big blind along, and you want to isolate Wei Qin Yang's clearly wide range under the gun and just play heads up.
Yeah, that's what we kicked around on the podcast, and that feels like it makes the most sense.
Let's talk about the yucky spot that Rui Cow is in.
Yeah.
You never like having 9s when under the gun opens and the small blind 3-bets and you're in the big blind. There's a lot of spots where this is just an auto fold.
Yeah.
But if Rui knows anything about Wei Qin Yang, and I believe he probably does, clearly he knows something about Tom Dwan. He's one of the most famous poker players in the world. I don't think you can just go folding 9s here, right?
No, I don't think so. Now, I don't think I would go calling 9s either. I think mostly I'm 4-betting 9s here because calling sets up a spot where we're off in 3 ways, and that sucks. If we 4-bet, I shouldn't say worst case, but often we're going to be in a situation where Wei folds, Tom calls, we're in position in a bloated pot with the initiative, and we win a lot post-flop.
We sometimes do get blown off the hand. And
Of
by
course.
calling, we get to set mine. And
That is
if
true.
we know about Wei's wide range, we know he's less likely to 4-bet.
Yep.
So that means that we're going to see a lot of flops. The math is good for a set mining. So I don't think calling would be terrible.
And it's only 6.5 blinds to set mine right now,
Yeah.
as long as our under-the-gun player doesn't put in the 4-bet, which, as we see, he's very wide, so he's not going to have that many 4-bets.
Right. So Rui opts for that option.
Yep.
Opts for the option. Cool.
Not crazy
Good
at
use
all.
of language.
Totally
by Grant.
reasonable. Totally reasonable.
It is. So we get to this flop, and Dwan makes this bet, and I think this is a really good bet. I think it's a really good idea to bet here.
Mm-hmm.
If you know anything about Wei, you know his range is wide, but you also know that he is more likely to have a king than Rui. Rui basically only has like king, queen suited for kings in his range.
So
Or
that's 2 combos.
he should only have that. Maybe he has more than that, but
Okay, well.
you'd expect a 4-bet from ace king. You'd expect weaker kings just to fold most of the time.
Yep.
So, but Wei could have a lot more, having opened under the gun and then calling, closing the action, getting a really good price. So you're just really hoping not to get action from Wei. Rui has a lot of 9s and 10s and ace queen, right? And jacks too, but we block that as Dwan, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So I like this bet.
Yeah.
We're scared of Wei. We kind of hope Rui calls. You know, we think that's probably the best outcome is Rui calling. Everybody folding is fine too.
Yeah, it's totally fine. And we're doing this mostly to sometimes charge worse hands and sometimes to fold out aces and ace queen, basically, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't need to size it up that much. I like the sizing a lot, too.
I do too. What do you think about Rui's call? Do you think he should ever consider folding here?
I mean, he should consider it, but he probably has to call. This hand's a little too good. It's really cheap. And if we know anything about Wei, we know that he's really wide, and he only called the 3-bet anyway. Yes, he's got some kings. He actually has a bunch of kings. As soon as if Wei puts any money in this pot, we probably can't put any more. Unless
we're
we turn
done.
A 9, right?
We're done.
But it's cheap enough. I know it's $14,000, but relatively so. It's cheap enough. It's a very small bet by Tom. I don't see how we can just go folding this right away. We often have the best hand.
Yeah, I think a call is mandatory but uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Dwan has plenty of hands with two back doors, like ace queen of hearts or whatever. We certainly have to see the turn with this hand. Unless Wei raises, then we're out.
Yep. Or even calls. We're pretty much emotional.
Well, we'll at least see the turn, and we might hit a 9.
You're right. You're right. We can see it.
But luckily for us, Wei folds.
So both Tom and Rui get what they want, really, which is the guy who sort of seems like, what's going to happen over here, right?
What's going to happen over here? You don't have to say that on Nitro Betting. What you know you're getting is great value. We don't have the Poker Guys specials.
I thought you were falling down a big...
I was,
Big
but I was
hole.
able to climb my way out based on the love I have for Nitro Betting and the strength it gave me.
It fired you through the pain.
Yeah, it fired me through the pain, and you can be fired through the pain on Nitro Betting. Use the link in our pinned tweet when you sign up, or you don't get access to our promotions and specials. That ad, it made a lot of sense, and it was well said by everybody.
Nothing weird happened at all.
It's a good ad. You just enjoy it.
Six of hearts. It's a 3-bet pot. Tom gonna play cautious here. Quick check around. Double pair. Tom trying to get the showdown. Does Rui Cal want to showdown his hand? Nah, he's gonna reach for chips, try to value bet against ace high, hoping that Tom Dwan is trying to move his opponent. I'll try to think he's getting ace high moves off of, but he's actually got 2 jacks here. Rui Cal does not know. Value owning himself here. So Tom's got to be thinking, okay, Rui Cal didn't 4-bet pre-flop, so ace-king, very unlikely. Queens, very unlikely. Kings and aces, very unlikely, of course. So Tom's thinking, okay, does he have like pocket 10s, pocket 9s? Would they bet? Does he have king-queen? King-jack? Well, he's holding 2 jacks, so that's unlikely. And it does kind of seem that Tom's reaching for chips. He's actually raising with pocket jacks. This is unconventional, but correct. How does he know that Rui Cal's got a worse pair?
What? 78.
Maybe it was the speed of Rui Cal's turn check back that makes him think that Rui Cal does not have a king. No 4-bet means jacks would be the best pre-flop pair. This is absolutely sick. I've never seen anyone find a raise with 2 jacks on a king-king 6-6. This is all the history they've built up. Many years of Triton cash games and tournaments. And many years before that too. Rui Cal is just lost. Lays it down.
Well, Tommy Dwan, he really went for it, didn't he? He really went for the value there.
I mean, we had a real discussion both before we even started talking about this on our podcast and then in the podcast about, is this value? Is this a bluff? What is going on in this river? Why are these people putting money in the pot? It seems kind of odd, right?
Well, let's get to it by
Okay.
going backwards.
Oh, okay. Makes
Those
sense.
who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. So we'll go back to the turn
And repeat that.
and talk about the turn. It's the 6 of hearts. They both check, and I think Dwan's check makes plenty of sense. You could charge Rui, though. It really depends on what you think about Rui, right? Like, do you think he's a guy who's going to call with hands like 9s and 10s again? Or, like most players, is he just going to fold facing further aggression?
There are some guys who are just always calling with their pocket pairs here, but mostly it isn't so much even what Tom thinks about Rui, it's what Rui thinks about Tom, right? Like and what Tom thinks about that. So like if Rui sees Tom as the kind of guy who's barreling a lot and bluffy and just going to show up with a whole lot of air here, even on the turn with another bet, then Tom can bet this for value too, because it means he's going to be more apt to be called by Rui's range that can call on the flop. But otherwise, I think a check makes a lot of sense. So if Tom's aware of his own image and if it's anything reasonable, I think a check makes sense.
I do too. Do you think Rui should have checked back, or do you think he should deny equity here to hands like ace queen and ace jack?
I mean, it's a good question. There are some cards we are in trouble against, but I think I like a check back. It's only one card to come here. We get to control the size of the pot. We can call a bet on the river if we want, depending on the size and what comes and all that. I think I like a check back mostly. What do you think? I mean, you could make a case for betting, though.
Yeah, I think checking is fine. Like you said, the one card to come really helps with not worrying as much about denying equity. You know, sometimes we get unlucky, and that's just okay.
Right.
We don't have a great hand for the situation that we're in. So if we get to win at the end by showing down, that sounds great.
One of the problems, of course, for Rui is if he bets and Tom doesn't fold, we're often losing as Rui, right?
Well,
so we're often
yeah.
putting money in and behind when called. Now, maybe ace-8 suited exactly can call
Maybe.
us, but kind of every other hand that Tom doesn't fold is beating us, which is a reason to check back.
We're going to be talking about ace-8 suited on the river here, which
Cool.
is pairing the 6. That card really shouldn't affect the hand too much too often. Tom Dwan could have ace-6 suited, maybe.
Yep.
I don't think Rui has any 6s in his range.
Hard
So
to imagine.
Dwan checking is pretty interesting. I think at this point, he's zeroed in on Rui's range. I think that's actually made clear by his raise.
Yeah.
So checking, why do you think he chooses to go with the check raise route instead of just betting and trying to get value out of 10s and 9s? It's a pretty dry situation on this board.
I mean, I think Tom really could bet for value here, and I'm sort of surprised he doesn't bet for value. I'd be so concerned that Rui would take the exact hand that he has and just knuckle that felt and say, like, no more money goes in, right? Do I win? I think I win a lot, but do I? Let's find out together, you know? Like, it's so hard for you to call me with ace-queen if I bet here, right, Tom?
Yeah.
So I'd be very worried about Rui deciding to go for value, even with a hand like 9s. 10s could try and get value out of 9s, I guess.
Well, maybe Dwan knows something about Rui because we see that Rui does go for value, and you and I on the podcast both discovered that we very much do not like this.
No.
This is clearly a value, but he's not trying to fold out a better hand. It seems impossible to fold out a better hand
don't see
with the
how.
line that's taken.
10s are calling.
So a couple things could be going through Rui's mind here. He's thinking, well, maybe Tom would have bet jacks or 10s on the river for value, right?
Sure.
So he thinks jacks at least, maybe not 10s. Maybe it's safer in his mind than it actually is. Maybe that's going on. Maybe he thinks Dwan has a lot more ace-8 suited in his range than is true, or
I mean, there's only 3 combos total.
and maybe he thinks sometimes Dwan's going to call with ace-queen, but I can't imagine that ever
No.
happening.
No way. Because the only way Dom could call with ace-queen is if ace-queen was somehow at least chopping the pot. But in what world does Rui only have ace-high here and called the flop with a guy behind him after calling the 3-bet
No
cold
world.
pre-flop? There's no world.
There is no world. So I think this is just a bit too ambitious of a value bet.
Yeah, me too.
And I think what happened here for Tom Dwan is he had one of those moments in poker, one of those field player moments where the seas parted and he saw it. He knew exactly what was going on. He knew that Rui had 9s or 10s almost exclusively. And he's like, I got to try to get more value in here. I think that's what's going on here. I think this is clearly a value raise. I think he's targeting exactly what Rui has, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, of course, Tom, to do this, needs to at least once in a while show up with a bluff here. Now, because he checked the river and checked the turn, I guess he can have some bluffs. He'd have to have cool blockers to those things. Maybe have, like, I don't know, Jack 10 suited or Queen Jack suited or something, blocking the higher ends of the pairs that Rui would show up with. I mean, I guess. But it does feel like Tom is just going for value here and hoping against hope that Rui is just like, I mean, I can't always fold. Right. I can't just throw my hand away every time when Tom does this. I don't know. I mean, if Tom doing this, is Tom check raising river that often on a double paired board and not having it very often? I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's really ambitious, but I think Dwan realized like it's basically risk free.
Yes,
and
that's right.
and that's why he went for it.
Right.
So maybe he doesn't have bluffs here too often, but he was like playing pure exploit risk free poker. Why not?
Yeah, when you have to be right. And
Yeah.
we see sometimes even the best pros. I'm thinking of Jason Kuhn in a hand back in the day. Think they're sometimes
against
free
John
rolling.
Duffy.
Yes, think they're free rolling the river and make the raise, and it turns out they're not free rolling the river. They're losing. They get called and they lose a lot more money than they had to. This is not that case. Dwan just has to be right about this almost always to make this play because it feels like he's not going to get very many calls.
Well, he didn't get a call this time, but he was right about
Yep.
Rui's range. Now, maybe Rui calls with 10s,
Maybe he does.
Because Rui has a lot of 9s, 10s, and jacks. Maybe he's calling with, some of his 10s and all of his jacks.
Yep.
Right? And 9s are clearly the worst of those hands, so let's fold because we don't have any 8s in our range. Anyway, we don't have ace-8 suited in our range. We called the 3-bet pre-flop, right?
Mhm.
So it makes sense to fold this hand, too.
Yep.
Let's see what the solver had to say about all of Tom Dwan's thoughts.
Sounds good.
Can you solve the beautiful mind that is Tom Dwan? That is what Danny Sprung attempted to do using Pio Solver. Back to the flop. Dwan is supposed to bet, and bet small only.
Cool.
Seems clear.
Nailed it.
Rui has a pure call. These solvers can't get through one solve without saying pure. They just can't do it.
So for people who don't know, that means they should call 100% with this hand.
Yeah, not
there's
raise.
no balancing of any kind.
No
It's
raise,
all
no
just call.
fold. Always call.
Yep.
On the turn, where things get a little sloppier, Jacks bets 34% of the time. So Dwan didn't bet, and the solver's fine with that. Jacks don't bet that much. The equity range versus range is a 50-50 split, according to Denny, which means fewer bets for out of position, which
Yep.
is a little spice that Denny put on that one.
That's good. Makes sense.
Yep. 9s with a heart, which Rui does have, bets 16% of the time. The rest of 9s bet 0% of the time. So equity denial, no thank you, says Pio. I don't care about equity denial. I'm a robot.
I'm thinking about not just this hand, but the other millions of hands.
All right, on the river, Dwan is supposed to bet, and he's supposed to bet for big sizing.
So to be more polarized, basically,
Yeah.
to sort of force the hero call.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I wonder what would have happened had he done that.
Do we actually get a sense of what big sizing is?
No, Danny just says bigger sizing, but I imagine that means at least 60% of pot.
Oh, yeah, probably like 70 or 80% even.
So if he could actually get called, that would have been more value.
A lot more value, yeah.
The solver would have beaten the Tom Dwan on this
Maybe
one.
that's like 45 to 50K
Yeah.
if he can get called by 9s.
Yeah.
Are 9s supposed to call?
This
We
is
don't
what
know.
Danny says about 9s.
Okay, good.
9s with his exact suit is supposed. Not the call, but because Dwan
Yeah.
checks. So 9s with Rui's exact suit is supposed to be a pure bet, but overall 9s is only a 30% bet. Pio is hallucinating. JK, not sure what it's thinking.
Yeah, so it's betting to get called by what?
Not sure. Danny doesn't know either.
Yeah,
obviously.
that's why he's saying he thinks I'm
I think we should take the
hallucinating.
overall number versus the exact suits number.
Yeah.
And just 30% of the time. That still seems high, but I guess it's raised by the exact suits betting 100% of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. That's very confusing.
So we
to
just
me.
don't know what to make of it.
Yep.
Yep.
It's really hard. I mean, Dwan, I guess it's targeting ace-8 when it bets. I don't know what else it could be
Yep.
targeting.
Seems like it. Dwan's raised, not loved by Pio.
Yeah.
It's a $6,000 error, according to Pio.
Yeah, it's like, come on. Are you really getting called by horse? And if you think about the strong hands that Rui has in his range, if he can ever have pocket 8s, ever, if he can have king, queen suited and check that back, ever, plus a little bit of queens, plus also the same the other two jacks that Tom doesn't have, 9s and 10s may always be a fold.
Yeah.
And so then Tom's getting no value, if that's true.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what Rui's going to do, but we know Pio doesn't like it.
Yeah, I understand that.
And maybe you can interpret the solver language for me to give me an exact percentage on this. Danny
Okay.
says 9s is actually supposed to call some of the time.
We need more than that, man. Okay, that means less than half.
Yeah, I would guess so.
Probably like 20 to 30%. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my interpretation. Some of the time.
Yeah. Well, that's good
I mean,
for
that-
Dwan.
That's true whether, anything more than 0.1% is some of the time.
Yeah, but he
right?
wouldn't have said that if it was 0.1%.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It's 0.1% to 100 is some of the time.
99.9.
I don't know. I think even 100 could be some. Some can be all. All can be some. Can't it?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Let's leave that to the solvers.
Okay, let's leave it. Let's leave it to the historians to sort it out. We want to hear what you have to say before we let history speak on this hand. What do you guys think about this crazy, crazy river play? Perhaps by both players. Solver not in love with it. We're not sure and are a little confused by what the solver has to say. Did Tom Dwan just make a perfect read? Did he not? Is this just bad? Let us know in the comments.
Do. And also join our Discord. It's fun, There's a link in the description. We'll see you there.